week 2 of the fantasy football season. And here's top 15 tight ends I'm ranking this week. Number 1, Sam Laporta of the Detroit Lions. I know Laporta, he had a down week in week 1. But I believe most of the tight ends had a down week in week 1. Most tight ends had bad weeks. But Sam Laporta, great tight end last season. What a rookie year was for him. And this week, a good matchup with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coming in. I believe this is going to be a shootout in Detroit. So after last week coming off a bad game, most of the tight ends did, but Sam Laporta, I think, bounces back in this one and has a good game. Number 2, Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs. So Kelce, he was a non-factor in the victory versus the Baltimore Ravens in week 1. Kelce, I still think, could go out there and make the big plays, even though more weapons are added to this offense. Xavier Worthy had the 2 touchdowns. He broke out. Rashee Rice had over 100 yards in that one for the Kansas City Chiefs. But Travis Kelce, you never really see him have 2 bad games in a row. And this week in a matchup versus Cincinnati Bengals, I think Travis Kelce goes out there and continues his good track record versus Cincinnati. Number 3, Trey McBride of the Arizona Cardinals. This week, a potential shootout versus the Los Angeles Rams coming to town in a division matchup. So Trey McBride last week, only 5 catches, 30 yards. But I believe he'll bounce back this week with a good ball game. He's the number 2 target in the offense behind Marvin Harrison. And even with a bad ball game, he had 9 targets as Trey McBride. So if him and Murray just hit on a couple more passes, he could be in for a big game, especially in this division matchup in Arizona. Number 4, George Kittle of the San Francisco 49ers. George Kittle, it was a down game for him where San Francisco, their offense was led by Jordan Mason in between the tackles and having a monster game filling in for Christian McCaffrey. But this week, it's going to be an easier matchup in the passing game, I believe, for this 49er team. They got a good matchup versus the Minnesota Vikings, where their defense shouldn't really be that good. Even though they blew out the New York Giants, this San Francisco offense is a top 5, maybe even top 1, top 5, maybe top 2 offense in all pro football. So after a down week for George Kittle, I think he bounces back and has one of his better games of the year. Number 5, Mark Andrews of the Baltimore Ravens. So some people might think it's hard to have Andrews at number 5 after coming off of 2 catches, 14 yards in that ball game. But Mark Andrews, I still believe he's one of the better tight ends in the league. He was drafted as a number 3-4 tight end, and it was only one down game versus a good defense in the Kansas City Chiefs, where Isaiah Likely was the main target in that game. And it just the way it went out. So like I said, Mark Andrews, I don't think is 100%. But as the weeks go on, I think he'll improve. And Lamar Jackson and Andrews have had a good rapport for many seasons. So this week, with a great matchup versus the Vegas Raiders, I think he bounces back and has a good game. Number 6, Kyle Pitts of the Atlanta Falcons. Kyle Pitts was the only player in the passing game for Atlanta that went out there and had good impact. Kyle Pitts can line up on the inside, on the outside, make some plays. And he's like a hybrid type of tight end, lining up in different formations. This week with a decent matchup at the Philadelphia Eagles, where we just saw they gave up 29 points to the Green Bay Packers. I think Pitts, again, could go out there and have a good game. And Kirk Cousins, we know over the last couple seasons, likes targeting the tight end. Number 7, Dalton Kincaid of the Buffalo Bills. So Dalton Kincaid, it was a down game for him, no doubt about it. 1 catch, 11 yards, and he barely got targeted in that one as well. But this Bill offense, they're going to have to rely on the tight end as the season goes on. They got a lot of receivers, but not really a number 1. Keon Coleman, Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir, Matt Collins, and Kincaid, I think he could work the middle of the field, and this week's a pretty good matchup at the Miami Dolphins, where their defense over the last few seasons have had trouble versus Buffalo Bill offense. So Thursday night game, usually a high-scoring game, and I think Dalton Kincaid goes out there and has a good one. Number 8, Isaiah Likely of the Baltimore Ravens. So Likely definitely moving up the ranking boards quick, coming off that monster performance, 9 catches, 111 yards, and a touchdown. Inches away from his second touchdown, where his toe was just out of bounds in the end of that ball game at the Kansas City Chiefs. So Likely, last season he emerged when Andrews was out with injury on 2 tight end sets, and Likely is going to see a lot of snaps, I believe, for the remainder of the season with this Baltimore Raven team, because he's athletic, yards after catch. Saw what he did in that ball game with a long touchdown, and this week in a great matchup versus the Vegas Raiders. I think Likely goes out there once again and has a top 10 performance. Number 9, Evan Ingram of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So a lot of tight ends, they didn't do much in week 1. Evan Ingram only 1 catch in that ball game. And it's just been a weird week 1 where the tight ends didn't get much going. But Evan Ingram's a good tight end. I still believe he's one of the more athletic and hybrid tight ends in the league as well, where he could line up on the outside. And last season he had over 100 catches. I know they brought in Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas Jr. to go with Christian Kirk this offseason was this Jacksonville Jaguar team. But Evan Ingram, just one down game. I don't think he's really a tight end that's going to be bad this season and still be a top 10 option weekly. Number 10, Brock Bowers of the Las Vegas Raiders. I thought it was a decent debut for Brock Bowers. I know this Raider offense isn't going to really be good this season. Well, Bowers, he went out there and had a solid performance, 6 catches, 58 yards on 8 targets. And he's going to be a matchup problem for most safeties and linebackers this season is Brock Bowers, one of the more highly touted tight end prospects to come out in the last decade. So this week in a matchup where they're most likely going to be trailing early and often is this Vegas Raider team. I think Bowers, he's going to get his targets and he's going to make some plays this week. Number 11, Dallas Goedert of the Philadelphia Eagles. So Dallas Goedert, not a great game, but he still had 7.10 fantasy points in PPR leagues, which is pretty solid compared to some of these other tight ends, what they did in week 1. So Dallas Goedert, I know he's the 4th or 5th option in this Philadelphia Eagle offense, but he's a tight end that could go out there and he can make the plays. He's a tight end that's a big target, and he knows how to work the middle of the field, and there's no attention on him. When you got A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith on the outside, and Saquon Barkley, who's going to have a monster season, with teams have to worry with all those weapons. Goddard, there's going to be times where he's going to leak by those secondaries and make some plays. So this week in a potential shootout with the Falcons coming to town on Monday Night Football, I like Dallas Goedert as a top 12 option. Number 12, Jake Ferguson of the Dallas Cowboys. So Jake Ferguson, he left with a knee injury in week 1 versus the Cleveland Browns. But it looks like they're hopeful he's going to play, Jerry Jones saying. And even he's going to take part in individual workouts here today is Jake Ferguson. The reports have come out. So he was the number 2 target in Dallas last season in the passing game behind CeeDee Lamb. This season, either him or Brandon Cooks will be the number 2 option. We saw Cooks find the end zone in week 1. But Ferguson, he's a good tight end. He knows how to run the routes. And Dak Prescott's always had good rapport and made a tight end a vocal point in the offense. So this week in a good matchup versus the Saints, if he plays Ferguson, I think he has a decent game. 13, Pat Freiermuth. The Pittsburgh Steelers, Pat Freiermuth, it was a mediocre ball game for him in week 1. Looks like Justin Fields once again is going to start. And we saw Justin Fields the last couple of years. Him and Cole Kmet had a good rapport. So I think Pat Freiermuth could go out there, have a decent ball game. He's a good route runner, just got a nice contract extension. And this week it's a middle-of-the-pack matchup, I think, at a decent defense at the Denver Broncos. But Justin Fields, he's the type of quarterback that he's looking to run, or he's looking for those quick hitting passes where that definitely can help Freiermuth. And like I said, Freiermuth's the number 2 option in this passing game behind Pickens. Number 14, Colby Parkinson of the Los Angeles Rams. So Colby Parkinson now, he's going to get more of a role in this offense. Puka Nacua out at least a month with a knee injury. I know Tyler Johnson had a decent game. DeMarcus Robinson, Tutu Atwell, the Rams have as well. But Matthew Stafford, he's always liked targeting the tight end. In week 1, 4 catches, 47 yards at the Lions. So this week in a potential shootout in a division game at the Arizona Cardinals, I think Colby Parkinson could carve out a decent role. And he had a better game than some of these tight ends as well in week 1 that I mentioned earlier. So as a top 15 option, he cracks the list. And the final tight end, I'm ranking this week's Dalton Schultz of the Houston Texans. So Dalton Schultz, it's going to be hard for him to have weekly value and put up fantasy points in an offense, obviously with Stephon Diggs, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and Joe Mixon, who still has a lot of left in the tank in the backfield for Houston. And Dalton Schultz is a touchdown dependable tight end, but he's a good route runner in Schultz. We've seen him have good seasons the last few years in Dallas, then last year with this Houston Texan team. And this week it's a pretty decent matchup on Sunday Night Football with the Chicago Bears coming to town. So Dalton Schultz is a back-end option where he was drafted in a majority of fantasy leagues. I think could have a mediocre ball game. That's the top 15 tight ends I'm ranking for week 2 of the fantasy football season.